Hello, this is Virtuals to Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Forks are one of the basic tactics in chess, where one piece attacks two of the opponent's pieces. And this is forcing, potentially winning material or some other concession, because we can only move one piece per turn. Now in this game, I played Walpurgis, another Australian, in an Australian tournament. So we're going to look at one game where I play black and one game where I have the white pieces, and it gives a good example of the power of forks in chess. Now Walpurgis is a little bit earlier in his chess journey compared to myself, but still played fairly well. Now I had the black pieces in game one, and as usual I will play e5 against e4, and Walpurgis started with the Italian, and against the Italian I always play knight f6, so two knights defense, and yes, the four knights. So what do I know from this opening setup? Basically, it means that my opponent is planning on playing a more conservative, potentially closed game with the four knights. And the four knights is good for black because in this point it is basically 0-0-0. So black has basically equalized from the opening. And the reason for that is white is often expecting a quietish game, but we have the immediate knight captures pawn on e4. If they capture back, which is expected, we now have d5 and the first fork in the match. Now here, it's still 0-0-0, but it requires white to know the best response, which is bishop back to d3. Not uncommonly, white will capture the pawn, capture back with queen, and here black has an advantage. Next, they start to sort of develop their other pieces. They push d3, that makes sense. I now develop my bishop, getting ready potentially for long castles. They sort of maneuver their knight around, which is interesting. I sort of develop, and here this push of the early queen is often bad. It's it's not uncommonly seen in sort of play from people sort of early in the chess career, but the queen potentially gets pushed around unless it's really part of a specific attack line. Here, the g6 attacking the queen, so I have to move the queen back a second time. You can see Stockfish reckons that the queen needs to hightail out of there all the way back to d1. But by trying to keep the queen out often just doesn't work if you're not part of a coordinating attack, because I get to develop my bishop, again with another attack on the queen. Queen moves a third time. Now here, I expected that my opponent was probably going to castle sort of short, so I wanted to rotate this knight potentially into part of the attack. And so knight jumps forward, firstly attacking that piece. They decide to short castles, that's straight up hanging, take, of course attacking the rook, so winning tempo, the knight out of there, and what I saw, if you can see, there is a potential fork. However, I think my opponent was looking at that potential hanging pawn, because they lost one hanging pawn, now they see the second hanging pawn, but they missed the absolute devastating second fork, a royal fork. King has to move. They lose their queen. Look, it's really, really bad now, somewhere in this sort of -12 sort of territory. They now capture back my knight, and unfortunately we hit fork number 3. Bishop captures the pawn on d3. Absolutely devastating. They make one more move. I capture one of the rooks, and my opponent opts to resign here, basically emotional damage. Let's have a look at the second game now, where I have the white pieces. I develop e4, and they play the Piet's defense. I have no particular way of playing this other than take the center with my pawns, potentially develop knights, and they play the check defense. Again, this just general logical play here works actually fairly well. He takes, I take back, they develop, I develop my bishop, castles, castles at the end, at the beginning of move 8, I am at about plus 0.5. So given that this was purely opening principles, it's not too bad. Now, my opponent actually plays this fairly well. I suspect they must know the check defense. Here I make a mistake, and that's a mistake because I hang that pawn. However, I thought that they were going to see this tension and they might take, and I was right. Now queen captures and that pawn is no longer hanging. Again, this early queen move, it's not particularly bad, but it's also not particularly good. So here I sort of ask the question of what they're doing with their queen. Queen back, now develop my bishop. Obviously with a knight move, there'll be a potential discovered attack. So queen all the way back to d8. So again, 3 moves of the queen fundamentally didn't achieve very much. Really need to avoid those sort of moves. Now my goal is, given the king is on this side, rotate my knight back to this side. They sort of push forward here. I've decided to bring my bishop back, attack, rotate my knight. They now develop that knight looking at attacking. And here I'm seeing potentially queen to h3. So I want to attack down the h-file, potentially here. And Stockfish doesn't believe that this attack will work, so that's why they call it a mistake, but I thought it would work, and I still think it's good. So they take, I basically gambit that knight, and now bishop to h6. You can see Stockfish really, really doesn't like that move. I thought it was still okay. Attacking and pin. Here they strike out, and it's a mistake. They needed to play an improving move, queen, maybe force trade some queens, but it's so hard to see, right? It's so hard to see when your king is under attack. So they strike out to attack, but unfortunately that's a mistake because I can capture. You can see that's a very good move. Now attacking the rook, and obviously, it's so natural. Capture back with the king. But now I've got the trap set up for the first fork in this game, and it's a good one. Knight to the g5, potential next knight move to e6 will be a family fork, potentially black losing the queen again. Now here, black really only had one potential move, which is very difficult to see. So knight to f3 with a check, basically potentially asking me to capture back with one of those 2 pieces, taking away some of that risk. However, they didn't see that. They saw that they had to defend the e6 square, so they defended with king. However, fork number 1 in this game, knight captures pawn on h7, and that rook is lost. So they move away. Capture, unfortunately, they allows me to capture with another check. They capture back. Now I take that knight, and basically, remember my gambited knight? I got that back with interest. So very, very good. They now decide to give an attack on my queen. It doesn't really work because now queen to b3 with check. I'm inviting the king to take. Come on, take my pawn. They do. And unfortunately, they walked into the second fork, which is also a trap. Queen to e3. And black has lost their knight. So king forced away from the defense of the knight. Take. And here, I've got the rook pair and the queen. They've only got a queen and rook. Basically, it's very difficult for black to win. My goal here for white really is to see whether I can force, can I force down, the pieces, force trades? Because if I enter an endgame upper piece, very, very easy to win. And that's basically what happened. So they try to strike an attack. That's fine, Here, potentially there's a check. They try to sort of infiltrate with the rook. Doesn't work. Queen is just too strong. Check. they move the king. Now, potentially, if I could get the king back to this dark square diagonal, then queen here would be another fork. So check, hoping they would move the queen to one of those two squares, but they saw through that. That's fine. However, now I've got rook AD1, and this rook has nowhere potential that it can go. So basically, I forced trade a rook. Takes. Now they sort of try to activate their queen. Here we go. Let's trade. No. And this was a mistake because now I can force trade this queen. And in fact, I actually put these moves in as a contingency move. So I actually programmed them in effectively. So basically, check, king must go to this square. And now back here with a skewer, we must trade queens. So takes, rook up, absolutely winning. Look, we play a few more moves, but at this point, black opts to resign. Good game. GG. My big takeaway from this game is that if you're a beginner, look for forks, both against your opponent, but especially against yourself. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.